Today is May 18th, 2023. I am feeling still a little bit of processing, but I'm mostly really happy. Um, Yesterday was my appointment for starting up electrolysis for radial forearm phalloplasty, and I've got to say it. I was nervous going into it because I had already called so many places, and so many places wouldn't take insurance, or else were like, oh yeah, it's gonna take like 2 years trying to drag out appointments and stuff. And it's just like, it was a giant setup for frustration. It sucks to have to drive so far away to do electrolysis and actually have it be covered, but at the same time, I cannot afford to just pay for sessions. Um, like, I don't know who could afford that at the moment. Who is in the bottom even 75% of the United States income earners. But the point is, they take my insurance. It is a bit of a drive, but they were like, yeah, we can get you in 2 times a week, probably most weeks. Um, and, here's the only things that are required of you to do before each appointment. And it's not too bad. And they wanted to know about my health history and stuff. And I explained about everything, because it was a doctor there, and the doctor was seeing me so that insurance would cover it. So they have a doctor who works with the insurance companies, making sure that the patients really, really, really deserve the electrolysis to be covered by insurance or whatever. And so the doctor was, did normal doctor stuff like, oh, take your you know, temperature and check your oxygen in your blood and blood pressure and, blah, blah, blah. But also wanted to know my medical history stuff and all that kind of thing because it's so weird. And I was telling them about some of the stuff, and they were like, well, it sounds like for certain that you were cut, which most doctors that I've talked to are like, well, there's a high chance that you were cut, but they don't want to say like definitively because they weren't there, which I can sort of understand, but at the same time, like this doctor was like, all evidence points to it. So when I was born with sex characteristics of both sexes, either right then when I was a baby or later at another appointment, but most likely genital mutilation happened to me. Like it's like all evidence points in that direction. The next thing that they were like very wanted me to know is they had two other patients with similar stories of having been born and recognizing as they were growing up that they were different, but not knowing anything to say about it or what to do about it. They have also been probably cut, and they also don't know for sure because of what time it was in history when that was standard procedure to unfortunately harm babies in an attempt to normalize them into a gender, as if it's possible to just say, okay, here we arbitrarily have assigned you to girl, so now you will just magically be girl. They used to actually think that was possible. Science and medicine has moved forward and recognized that that is literally impossible and extremely damaging. Like, super damaging, not just to the body, but also to the psyche of the person involved as they grow up. But, like, even just physically, the doctor also said, they said that they also had horrible hormone problems, like I did. And part of the reason to go on to HRT wasn't just, I'm not a girl, I need to transition fully into boy, but also I have horrible health problems because when I was at some point when I had no choice in the matter, some authority figure chopped up one of my hormone producing organs, sex organs. And when you chop out something that produces hormones, Lo and behold, it creates a lifelong hormone imbalance. What? Crazy. What a concept. I don't know how it ever was an accepted thing in the medical community that that wouldn't happen. But for some reason, for decades, the medical community thought, oh, it's fine. Thank goodness it's not still like that for intersex babies that are still born in this country. But yeah, being born with characteristics of both male and female has been like such a disaster for my life. And basically, they said, I want you to know you're not alone. I have two other patients who've had the same sort of similar story where this was done to them. They had no say in the matter, they had no choice, and they were forced to live a way that wasn't, okay for them. And, you know, once they got into adulthood, had to face a lot of really hard things and very similar things. Um, it's nuts, but they they were very interested because out of all of their patients, they only have two other ones who are like me. But they were like, it's more common than a lot of people realize because a lot of people don't even look into it, or are afraid of looking into it. Like I originally was afraid of looking into it, so I understand that. Um, but yeah, the doctor, I told the doctor I don't like to be touched by doctors as much as humanly possible, so they didn't touch me. So I really appreciated that they went out of their way not to touch me, and they were very nice. And I feel like I'm making real progress with my atrophobia, like really real progress from going through this process. I think most doctors are just people, and if I can just focus on that and not the looming scary doctor part of it, um, I'm slowly making progress with my atrophobia. And I even brought up that my PCP has been working with me for years on helping me with that. And they were like, oh, that's so great. I've heard really good things about your PCP, but I don't know them. What they do know is they have met my surgeon in person, and my surgeon actually, for any electrolysis place that they were going to work with, actually sat down in person and had meetings with doctors from those places to know exactly what should I put in letters for my patients so insurance will cover it, what sort of things do you need from me to make this as smooth as possible for patients. I didn't even know my surgeon did that, and I think that's amazing. I think that's awesome. So the doctor at the electrolysis place has actually met and sat down with and spoken with my surgeon in person and knows who they are in person and has their information on file. So if any questions or prior auths or whatever come up, like, they can just handle it. And I think that's amazing. I had no idea. That just made me super happy to know that. And also to have my surgeon's stamp of approval on the place, I guess, in a way too, because I trust my surgeon. I like my surgeon. So yeah, that was just, I was like, that my surgeon took time to go and meet all these people and make sure that things would be as smooth as possible for patients is like very characteristic of him. He would definitely be the kind of guy that do that, but at the same time it's like really refreshing that he did that. um I met the person who will be doing my electrolysis, and she's a really nice trans woman. And she was like, you know, here's how it's going to be, and I'm very nerdy, so to distract you while it's going on and everything, I've got like anime and audiobooks and D&D campaign set up and everything in there. And I was just like, you're such a nerd, this is so great, because I'm pretty geeky myself, so I'm a video gamer and stuff. So, but I thought that was pretty cool. I saw a car when I was coming in that was just covered with like anime decals in the windows and stuff. in all the like corners of every window and stuff. And so I was like, oh wow, someone's a nerd. This is great. And then it turns out that it's actually my electrolysis specialist. So that works out. And they explained they're only doing topical pain reliever, and they do that for 20 minutes, and then they start to work. Um, I have clippers that I use to cut my own hair and stuff. I need to cut my hair. My beard and my hair are getting a little long. But anyway, but the point is I just need to shave the hair. I'm too hairy. um, my mother would have agreed with them my whole life. Anyway, I've always had a lot of body hair, and so I actually have too thick and powerful of body hair on my arm. So I have to basically put the number one guard on my clippers and cut my hair down short. But you don't want it to be invisible. When you go to electrolysis, there does need to actually be hair follicles visible because they're trying to kill the hair follicle and not your nerves. So they need to be able to see where stuff is at. Electrolysis is the only FDA approved method for permanent hair removal. Technically, some people can get permanent hair removal from laser hair removal, but laser hair removal is not as effective. And most people, it's not permanent for laser hair removal. The other thing with laser hair removal, though, is it can damage the nerves, and electrolysis specifically is trying not to. And since I want to have sensation on my actual penis, not damaging the nerves is a good thing. It's an important thing. So they said that they will do it until it seems like it's permanently good to go, but that they, with hairs as see-through as mine, I have very pale skin, which is helpful for hair removal processes, period. But dark hair is also very helpful for hair removal processes. And I have very, very, strawberry blonde hairs on my arm that are basically see-through. So even though there's lots of them and it's really thick, it's unfortunately, they might have to do it like 3 times per hair follicle. But they said that it shouldn't be too terrible bad because they can get me in hopefully like 2 times in a week. And they're expecting it to take 4 to 8 months. And 4 to 8 months I can live with. I was hoping for 3 to 6 months originally because that's what online it says that it takes, like that it can take if you do actual minimum appointments. But also I recognize that I don't have dark hair. I have very strawberry blonde hair. So I knew that might complicate things slightly. And also, all these other places were saying, oh, it's going to be like 2 years. And I'm like, but it's on my arm. Your arm does not have the same kinds of hormones going to it that your face or your genital region does. Those places definitely take longer and take a lot more pain relief as well. They're pretty sensitive. So you might need like an injected pain reliever or something. Like it can be painful. But it takes longer because you have hormones like going to your face or your genital region that are encouraging all of that to grow. And on your arm, it's not that same kind of hormone input saying, hey, quick, grow more. Yeah, keep going. So I was very like, man, that's not the best. Thankfully, it looks like I'm going to be able to keep some of the hair right, like up here that's on the back of my hand and stuff. And then, I just intend to get like a tattoo once I have the scar on my arm. And my surgeon said wait 2 years to get the tattoo. Technically, you can try doing it at 1, but my surgeon was like, you take a little bit of a risk doing it at 1 year. There's 0 risks if you do it at 2 years. So, like I said, I trust my surgeon, so that's probably what I will do. Um, but yeah, I I am just like very relieved that the appointment went well. The doctor seems nice. The electrolysis specialist seems nice. They, talked me through all the steps and stuff. Oh, they have therapy pets there too. At this electrolysis place, they have a therapy dog who's like this bright white little Pomeranian, and then they have a pure black, I mean super black, little cat. It's full grown, but it is so tiny. I'm used to our cats, but this cat is like super small. And it's so cuddly. Oh my gosh. It just wanted to cuddle me and rub its face against my chest. And it was, anyway. And then they also have a therapy snake. So, yeah, I was really, really happy in general. They seemed super kind and nice and um, warm. They were very warm. So, yeah, I'm excited. It's nice that they're nice, but also I'm also excited that I hopefully won't be their patient for super long. The biggest thing is once I'm to like 80% done with electrolysis, I'm supposed to call and schedule surgery. And there's like this little pitter patter of hope in me now that what if I could have the surgery before the end of the year? What if I could have it in like end of fall, beginning of winter? Um, that would be incredible because I feel like viscerally every month that goes by and I'm not through surgeries. Like I feel the weight of how heavy that is, how it is very hard for me every single month that slips away of my life that I'm not done with surgeries and able to just exist and go about my life and just be a guy who needs therapy replacement for the rest of his life, which is there's plenty of men who were born with only male sex characteristics and still gender identify as male as they grow older who also have to get hormone replacement therapy because they naturally don't produce enough testosterone to have healthy levels. So at that point, that's basically all I feel like I would be. I feel like I told the doctor was like, so being born with both characteristics, you didn't feel like you were ever a girl in the first place. And I was like, in all honesty, uh, my reproductive organs or parts, or however you want to say that, for both male and female were equally non-functional. I could not use either. I no matter no matter what, I would have been sterile. Like I was born sterile. I could never have reproduced no matter what. The female parts, like technically they were there, but they were so deformed and not correct that it was like they weren't functional. So I feel like I had just as equal a chance of being a boy. Like the hole for the vulva and vagina area, it was so minuscule. There's no way anything could have gotten in there. And then the tubes going along were too tiny for any use. Plus, they were shaped wrong. Plus, one of my ovaries was 3 times too small. Like like even if you talk about the parts that got removed during like the hysterectomy and stuff, like in actuality, they weren't functional, normal female parts that most, you know, trans female to male people would have, taken out and removed and stuff. Like, so for me personally, I don't feel like I was necessarily a girl in the first place. Like, I realized that that's what was put on my birth certificate, and I realized that's what, I was raised as, whether I wanted to be or not. That was the expectation that was put there, but in actuality, I don't feel like physically, like my anatomy reflected that at all. So it's hard for me to accept that because I don't feel like that was true. And They were like, that's fair. That's totally fair. Like, to them, that makes sense. So it was nice to have a doctor who was candid about it instead of, I mean, my PCP is a little bit candid about it, but most of the doctor I've had 6 second, I guess technically this one could be counted as a seventh, even though they didn't investigate it quite as fully. But the point is um, multiple doctors have reviewed this or gone over this or whatever and come to similar conclusions. But not always been very like, yeah, I for sure think it's this. They've always been like, well, it can either be this or like they don't want to say hard line, this is probably what's going on here. They want to say, well, it's a high possibility, there's a lot of evidence for this. They use language that makes it very clear that they don't want to say something definitive. And this doctor used language where they were pretty confident in being definitive. And I appreciated that because on the one hand, it's like I get people wanting to be cautious, wanting to avoid lawsuits, all that kind of stuff. Totally understand that. I'm not faulting any doctor who is being cautious, but at the same time, I grew up most of my life being told, what's wrong with you, and thinking, I don't know. There's all this evidence that something is wrong with me, so I know there's something wrong with me, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why. And because people who were saying bad things to me and, not being kind at all, being honestly some of the time outright cruel, like, because there was evidence that there was something strange, that there was something different, it reinforced that. It made it more real. And having evidence toward that it's not what's wrong with me, it's this. It's not what that I'm the problem. It's that there's this really explainable medical thing. It really, really helps me have something else as the definitive reinforced evidence. And also, there's something just really almost nurturing about it, because when I was younger, I really wished I was, at the time, it was a hermaphrodite. The word intersex didn't exist yet. Even though that had negative connotations and stuff, I still wished I was that, because I felt like it would explain everything. And then everyone would forgive me. And I was very, very naive about the everyone would forgive me part. But it's still, I don't know, there's something really, really, like confidence building, and that somehow there was some tiny part of me that guessed it right. There, even though I didn't know, I had no idea, even though it was extremely hard for me to accept that it was true because of the religious rigidity that I grew up in and the, very aggressive way that I grew up and everything. I grew up in a lot of fear. So it was very hard for me to accept it, even though it's what I had always secretly hoped for when I was younger. Because I didn't know there was such a thing as female to male trans when I was younger. When I was a kid, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, I had no idea that that even existed. But I knew a hermaphrodite existed, and I thought that would just explain me. And then everyone would forget me, and they would realize it's not my fault that I'm weird. And everyone would forgive that I'm an inconvenience. And I would finally make sense. And there's just something really, really, like, wholesome somehow for me, in that I might have gotten it a little wrong, in that, wrong terminology, and that I didn't know anything about the subject matter and stuff like that. But in the core of the thing, I was correct. I might have gotten it wrong in that, oh, maybe people won't disown me and stuff like that. But I didn't get it wrong in that I make sense. It makes sense. And I didn't get it wrong in that is what it was. And there's just something about that. And someone, every single time each doctor encounters me and is like, oh wow, it's kind of like they're all saying wow in the same way for the same reasons, and it builds up more and more and more like reinforcement in a positive way for me instead of in a negative way, like when I was growing up. And it frustrates me to no end, the sheer like ignorance that there still is in certain communities on something that there's tons of information on about, such as being intersex. Like it really really frustrates me. Like today, you know, is gearing up for June, which is LGBT plus, month, Pride Month. And President Biden was like, on this day of remembrance and everything, I just want to remember and remind that the LGBT plus community deserves just as many rights and stuff. And I was like, oh, cool, good job. I would like a little more action with that statement, but thank you for making the statement, period. Most presidents going out through history have been very scared to be supportive in any way, shape, or form. So thanks for at least being public about your support. And, like, I looked at the comments, and some of them were, thank you, this is awesome, whatever. And some of them were so frustrating. They were like, once two men or two women without scientific aid naturally reproduce, maybe I'll respect it. And I was like, what about all the barren people who are born and there wasn't anything else going on, but they couldn't have kids? Are they suddenly not male or not female simply because they couldn't reproduce? What about all the women who've gone into menopause? Do women magically just stop being female when they hit menopause and they're not reproducing anymore? Like, the logic of that is so completely unfounded in anything real or realistic at all. Like, it's so frustrating. Another one was like, they specifically added intersex in there as one of the things that was a hoax and was just invented as a way to try to get away with sin. And I'm like, I'm intersex. I did not get to choose when I was born whether I was born with characteristics of whatever. I was just born. Like, as a baby, I did not get to choose. It is not a sin to be born into the world and come into existence. You did not sin by just popping out of a womb. That's not sin. So, you didn't get to decide when you were a baby if you were born intersex. That's not a real thing. You cannot decide when you're an infant. So it's impossible for an intersex baby to be born sinning. They didn't do anything wrong. They were just a baby who was born. That really, really bothers me. Like, it shouldn't be a sin, period. A person transitioning should be an acceptable thing, period. But to say that being intersex is a choice is the most egregiously ignorant thing in so many levels, because it's not just showing off you're against treating other human beings with equal rights. It's not just you're against trans people being able to transition. It's not just, oh, I am a bigot. Like, you're attacking an infant who had no say in the matter, who had no choice, who was medically born with different anatomy than is average. But in reality, it's a spectrum. There are tons of men who are born with somewhat feminine characteristics, and there are tons of women who are born with somewhat masculine characteristics. An intersex baby is just born with both sex characteristics of some sort. And to judge them as somehow being sinful in choosing that, they didn't choose that. That's so frustrating. There's a bunch of people who were like, oh, they're American, they already have the same rights as all other Americans, when it is extremely easy to go look up any research on the matter at all, and research finds that that is absolutely not true. Like, there are, I think, over 30 states still where it is legal for workplaces to discriminate against you if you're LGBT plus. You do not have job security. You don't have the same security for things in the hospital or the medical system. Insurance, you have to fight tooth and nail and go through a zillion hoops just to get medical care. You have to deal with a bunch of people like constantly saying that you shouldn't exist and you shouldn't have rights to care, especially when you're younger. But also, even as an adult, I have to go through so much crap just to get health care. And I live in a more liberal state. I live in a state that actually has laws protecting trans, medical care. And I still have to go through a ton of hoops to get that. Like, I have in my life literally been basically, I was asked to quit but laid off from a job because I was LGBT plus. No other reason. They actually told me as I was leaving I was an excellent worker. I did a great job. They thought I was really good. It was literally just that. And it wasn't even my manager who felt that way. It was actually the person who ran the place. It's a real thing. Like, you act like there's the same rights, but there's not. That, like, objectively, like, statistically, like, there's been research done on the matter. People did the hard work and the legwork for you. All you gotta do is read it. You don't have to do anything more than that. And yet, you still are like, oh yeah, since you're American, you obviously have the same rights. Not everyone born in America automatically has the same rights as the next American. It's a sad truth, but it is the truth. There's more marginalized groups than just LGBT plus. And anyone who genuinely believes that everyone has the same rights just because they're born in America is very, very oblivious to reality. Like, go actually look at any research on the matter. For real. Anyway, being born with your anatomy being objectively, having some more abnormality in it compared to what is, more normalized or average human anatomy, that's a medical thing. That's not just a mental disorder and the person's being crazy or something. Like, it's very hard to dismiss something that is scientifically verifiable fact. And I feel like people who are intersex should be given some grace of some kind because they didn't have any say in the matter, being born with deformities or differences, or like, who would ask to be born sterile and to be born with like sex characteristics from both sexes and to have to go through like a bunch of surgeries and stuff and to deal with hormone problems for the rest of their life because they got cut when they were a baby. But even modern times when it's not encouraged to cut babies anymore when they're born intersex, you still have to deal with so much stuff. And it's like, a whole bunch of extra side stuff to the difficulties that come through life naturally. Like, there are things that just happen in life that just sort of happen as you go through life that you have to become resilient about anyway. Starting from the very first second with hardship is terrible. And the thing is people have so much compassion for babies who are born with any other kind of deformity. You could be born with a cleft palate, or, oh, your heart was born on the outside of your chest. Let's put it back in there. Oh, this baby has to have surgeries. This is so sad. But you have to have surgeries because you were born with too many sex characteristics. That's sinful. It's just mind-boggling to me. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me. And the very same people say, oh, God doesn't make no mistakes. And yet you're literally saying that baby is a mistake. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Like, it's a complete illogical extremism. And it just makes me really, really sad because it's super unkind. I don't resonate with transitioning in the same way that the other trans people around me do. And that's always been a little bit hard for me because I don't find a bunch of specialness and meaning and like gratification in saying I'm trans. And I have a ton of people who I've known and met and everything who are trans who do. They very much get something substantial out of saying, "Oh, I'm trans." I don't feel that. And so I worry sometimes about even mentioning it because I don't want to come across as someone who's like trying to go into hiding and be a hidden trans person and no one ever knows or anything like that. But I don't want the first thing that anyone knows about me when they first meet me to be that I had to go through a transition. And I also don't want people to assume that trans is my like identity or something. I had to transition because I was born different and someone attempted a surgery on me when I was little and they picked the wrong thing. And I was a baby. I couldn't give any input. It was just done to me. I didn't choose it. And I instead now have to choose choices that help me live and help me get to a quality life and help me deal with health problems that I had my whole life. I have to deal with that, and it's not the same thing. And I get that a lot of the trans experiences are pretty, like very helpful to talk about with each other and stuff like that. There's some trans experiences that are really relatable, like gender dysphoria is a very real thing and very experienced. But like, I'm part of multiple trans groups online and stuff, and one of them today posted a big thing about how when they got their double mastectomy, they had to grieve their breasts, and that every trans person has to go through a grieving period after their surgery, and that's okay. And I was like, what? I did not grieve one single second after my surgery. Didn't miss them even for a second. And quite frankly, part of that, as much as I appreciated them before, because when I was living as basically as a dyke, as a very masculine leaning lesbian, one of the only things that could get lesbians to be attracted to me was my boobs. So I had an appreciation for them. Before the surgery, I was like, I don't hate them. I don't want them. I understand that they need to go. I don't have like a visceral disgust toward them, I don't like them. I'm not comfortable with them, but I can appreciate the good things that they've brought me. But after surgery, I didn't miss them at all. And part of that, I know, is because of how deformed my chest was. Physically, my anatomy in my chest was not average or normalized, or however you want to say that. Like, I had abnormalities. So not only was I getting rid of something that was causing me gender dysphoria, but I was getting rid of something that was causing me health problems, and that would cause me further health problems in the future. I was getting rid of, like, if someone got rid of a cyst, or if someone got rid of, a tumor, or if someone got rid of a hernia. That's how I felt about it. I felt like I was getting a medical procedure to help me. And why would I grieve about that? Why would I be sad about that? I have sensation in my chest for the first time in my life. I went through 36 years of my life without being able to feel anything on my chest. And now I have nerves that actually function and work, and I can feel. Why would I grieve? I have zero reasons to be grieving. And so sometimes I really don't relate. Sometimes I can relate to trans issues so strongly. I've even wondered if I should even call this a trans vlog anymore, because while I am in the process of transitioning, it's not the same kind of transition. I am not just transitioning because I mentally have understood a masculine self instead of a feminine self for myself my entire life. That is absolutely true, and that part of the trans experience I relate to very strongly. I absolutely grew up not understanding why I wasn't a boy. I have big laments in my journal as a teenager. Why wasn't I born a boy? Everything in my life would make more sense. I actually have that as proof, as evidence. Yes, I'm not misremembering. I do remember correctly that I felt this way. But at the same time, as much as I relate to that part of the trans experience, the whole going through surgeries and getting on testosterone and stuff like that, there's so many things about it that are different for me because it involves so much physicality in my body and in my organs and in my flesh. And it's not just like a cosmetic change. And some of the comments on the Biden thing, where he made a comment in support of LGBT plus community and everything, were about people mutilating themselves to turn into something they weren't. And I've said it before in other videos, but I feel every single surgery, yes, I get a scar from it, but I feel so much less like Frankenstein's monster. I feel so much more human. Every single surgery, I feel so freaking much more human. I felt like an androgynous blob. I felt like I was just an abnormality. Like I could not possibly fit into the world correctly. Like trying to stick a square block into a round hole. I felt extremely aware. Even if no one else that I was talking to knew about it, I felt like they could somehow sense it anyway. And I feel so much more like comfortable. And that part of the trans experience I can relate to. The wanting to feel comfortable in your own body. But there's so much more than just that for me. My bone density is getting better, and I'm finally to the point where early onset osteoporosis is just off the table. My hormone deficiency from my whole life destroying my health has just been like traversed and flat out flipped around, and I am it's like I'm shooting in a positive direction with my health. I keep finding new things every year that are like a health thing that's getting better and better that I wouldn't have even realized. They checked my blood pressure and they were like, wow, for your height and weight, you have incredible blood pressure. And when I was growing up, my blood pressure was so abnormally low that they were like worried they were going to have to start putting me on stuff. Like, I had such low blood pressure that it was like scary. And now I have healthy, actual blood pressure. Like, I just got tested for that too. Like, it is so significant for my health for me transitioning. It's not just transitioning for just gender dysphoria reasons. It's transitioning also for health and like health benefit reasons. And so there's a whole other aspect to me having been intersex and me transitioning that is just not like relatable in the same way. I don't know any other trans person who like has this experience of having deformities removed from your body, that are actual like medically considered deformities. Like, I don't know if there's actually like trans groups that are specifically toward intersex. I guess I could look it up. I've never really looked into it because intersex is just lumped in with trans. And some of the experiences are extremely, again, relatable. Like, they're to a decent degree of being on par. But some of them are just so different, and I feel like I don't really have any space to talk about that except here. And there's no one talking back to me about it. There's no intersex person saying, oh, here, I relate to this, or oh, here, this is what I experienced with it, or whatever. I have seen a few intersex YouTubers talk about it, and I related to them a little bit, I guess. So I guess that's why I talk about it here. But it's very different while having similarities. Thousands of babies a year are born intersex. And when I was growing up, there was like pure ignorance, and it was very taboo to even talk about such issues. Um, the doctor I was talking to yesterday flat out said that they know for a fact certain doctors did not inform parents even, that they would just do it because they worked with some of those doctors. And it's only been since like 1996 that it was started to be implemented, don't cut the baby. Like, it's not actually that long ago in terms of time. And there are doctors still alive who remember when that was standard procedure. And I'm so glad that's not done anymore. But it was done for decades, from the 60s until 1996. And honestly, there still was some places that did it after 1996. But from the 60s all the way till then, it was standard procedure in the US for all babies born. It was just considered standard across the board. And that group of people, those thousands of babies a year that were born through those decades, got cut. And they didn't ask to be, they didn't choose it, they didn't, get any say in the matter at all. They had no authority over their own physical body. And they have to deal with the repercussions as adults. They have to deal with the horrible, horrible repercussions for something they didn't choose. And I wish there was more help for that group of people in specific, because I'm one of them. And the help that's offered me is just what would be offered even an 18-year-old who's saying, I would like to start transitioning. Like, it's the exact same care. even my phalloplasty is just the same old phalloplasty as, was developed to help soldiers whose dick got blown off during wars and stuff. Like it's not actually geared toward, well, you have abnormalities, let's try to, it's just slap a dick on it and see if it works. Like it's, I just wish that there was something more definitive. But we're such a small part of the population. Intersex people are such an teeny tiny part of the population. So, I get why there's not funding put toward that. It's a very small, very specific group of people. I understand that the majority of people, this wouldn't even be applicable. There's way more trans people, like female to male trans people, it feels like at least, and male to female, trans people, and even non-binary, people who don't gender conform either way and they just maybe get top surgery or something. There's way more trans people getting surgeries than intersex people, I feel like. And maybe that's just how I feel. I have not looked up the statistics on that, but it feels that way. There's a thing called going into stealth after you get done transitioning or whatever. You don't let anyone know about your past life or whatever. Well, everyone already knows. Like in my world, at least, everyone already knows. I spent the first 30 something years of my life mostly presenting like a really masculine female, like very. I I was not a girly girl in any way, shape, or form any of my life, but um, I would have, like, if someone was walking by and they looked at me, they would have seen a girl. Um, Even once I identified as non-binary, I still looked enough like a girl that someone would have been like, "Oh, that's obviously like a butch lesbian," like, but they still would have guessed lesbian. They would not have guessed non-binary, probably. I don't know. Maybe nowadays they would have, but at the time they wouldn't have. So it's not like for me to quote unquote go stealth, I would have to literally disown every single person I know right now, which is not realistic at all. Um, I mean, I have family and stuff that didn't decide not to be respectful. I have family who thinks it's a sin that I was born in the first place. Like, anyway, the point is, I feel like if I talked about this kind of stuff with my actual trans friends, that they would accuse me of wanting to stealth. And me saying, I feel like my transition is a medical journey, and that once I'm done with the surgeries, I'm done feeling trans. Like, I'm done feeling like I was transitioning, because I'm not transitioning anymore. At that point, I'm just taking hormone therapy for medical reasons. Um, which again, there's plenty of people who need hormones for medical reasons. I mean, even just, again, a bunch of women in menopause have to take hormones for medical reasons just because they're going into that phase of life. Like, there's bunches of men who have to take hormones when they get older too, because they get into that phase of life and they don't naturally produce as many hormones. I just naturally don't produce that many hormones, even though I'm not that old yet. And it's like, to me, that's not stealthing. That's just me not advertising that that's how I was born and having to go into explanations and stuff. Um, but I say I'm trans because I'm in transition, but I don't feel the same. I, I, I don't feel like the terminology of being a trans person necessarily fully fits. I don't feel like I am female to male. And so that makes it harder because I don't feel like that's stealth. I had organs that are just as valid or just as unvalid, whichever way you want to look at it. That I have sex characteristics. Even after being cut, I have male sex characteristics that's remained, because they were internal and stuff. And it's like, to me, one person being there when I pop out the womb and making an arbitrary decision on what I am or not should not define the rest of my life. Because it was like a toss-up. It was literally like they could have taken a quarter and flipped it and just said boy girl. It would have had similar odds or whatever. And I know quarters don't have actual 50-50 odds, but the point is that they were on par with each other. Now, me growing up and understanding what I was and having a brain understanding of what I was and everything, the doctor could never have picked that. The doctor could never have known that. But the doctor had a 50-50 chance of saying, boy characteristics, girl characteristics, which ones to keep. And they just happened to keep the girl characteristics that they could see externally. Internally, those girl characteristics were completely non-functional. But anyway, the point remains. I don't feel like it's fair to say, well, the 50-50 shot happened to land in this direction, so that's what's substantial. Like, I don't feel like it's any more substantial than if it had fallen in the other direction. And it's frustrating that other people don't see that. It's frustrating that other people don't consider that to be true or valid. Like, how are magically some of my sex organs more valid than other ones, even though they were all right there? Even though they were all equally sterile. Like, it's so arbitrary. It's so, like, ridiculous to me. So I don't feel like it's, like, suggesting going stealth, and I am extremely supportive of trans rights. I don't want in any way, shape, or form to come across as if I feel like trans rights shouldn't be pursued and supported, because that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying I don't know that I feel like I am trans. But I say that I'm trans because it's an easier thing for people to understand than to understand intersex issues. And it's technically true because I am in transition. But the transition that I'm in, to me, personally, is not female to male. It's get rid of the deformities that feel inaccurate. I do not have a single female part at all. Period. Right now. I can recognize and accept that I was born with some female characteristics, even if they were sterile. But in actuality, the only thing left in me or of me is male. I don't have anything female left. But I don't have a penis yet because I have to finish surgeries. It's not my fault that I was born the way that I was. It's not my fault that my anatomy is a little different and I have to medically work around that. But it is important for my health and it is important for my longevity and my quality of life that I pursue that. And I feel like that would still be true even if the doctor had picked the correct thing in the crapshoot that happened when I was born. Say the doctor did say, you know what, 50-50 chance I'm going to pick boy. And so they picked boy. I feel like I would still, later on in life, need surgeries. I would still, later on in life, need hormone replacement if they cut something that affected my hormones. Like, I feel like I would still be in the same position, even if the doctor had picked male. Though the biggest differences would be I'd have a heck of a lot more relatives and stuff that gave a crap about my life in any way, shape, or form. I would have parents who were not completely like disappointed, and some worried I was going to hell just for existing. um, There'd be a lot less of the turmoil and the bullying and the gender dysphoria and the things that do come with being trans, the things that are relatable with trans issues. All of that kind of stuff there wouldn't be there, but the medical side of things would still be there. The medical side of things would still have to be addressed. I could still have health complications from having been born intersex. And so I feel like that medical side of things and everything makes it just different. And I feel like I want to have the best body that I can have when I can have it, and as much as I can have it. And it's very difficult for me that that's not an understood or understandable, it seems like, thing. Like, it's not just, I want to be comfortable in my own body, as much as that is absolutely true. I do. I very much want to be comfortable in my body. I want to have less gender dysphoria issues, and that is a big part of it, for sure. But the only reason I have those gender dysphoria issues is because a doctor picked the wrong 50-50 option. It's not because I was actually a girl. The medical side of things, to me, feels so real. I'm not just having surgery to feel better about the rest of my life as a guy. I'm also doing it to feel better about the rest of my life for my health as a person, wanting to have longevity, wanting to be able to just live a fulfilling life. I was born with extra barriers to entry. And if a baby's born with Down syndrome, there's compassion. If a baby's born intersex, they're a sinner. And I don't get that. I don't get that at all. But I am making progress in this transition. I am getting through this transition. I kind of feel like once I get to the point where I feel like the transition's done, that I might stop having this be a trans vlog, or maybe say, okay, here's this folder with my trans vlog in it, and now I'll just do a normal vlog or something like that. I don't know. It's years from now. I have plenty of time to make that kind of a decision. But I do feel like the transition part of things has an end point. And that once that end point happens, probably after I get tattooing done and stuff like that, and I'm all finished. All finished. Once all of that is all finished, I feel like there's really nothing else left going on with it. Or if there is, it'll be like maybe once or twice in a year that something comes up with it. And I feel like I can set this aside, say, trans vlog, here's this section of my life, and I have videos of it. I can go back and look at it. I can see the emotional turmoil of it. But, you know, it was a section of my life. It's not my identity. It's not who I am as a person for the rest of my life. And I guess that's the big difference. I feel like I will just be living the rest of my life with a few medical issues that, you know, who doesn't have a couple of medical issues? Like, that's really all it feels like. For me personally. And I know that that might be really taboo to say, or not okay to say, or that I definitely have guilt about it, because the trans community is already so small, and having one person step away from it or something like that makes a difference. But I don't feel like I was 100% part of it in the first place. I don't feel like I'm 100% part of any group like that I've ever encountered. I've always struggled to fit. And I don't I right now I say I'm a trans male even though I'm not transitioning from female. I'm transitioning from intersex to just male. That's how I view it. I'm transitioning from having characteristics from both sexes to characteristics of only one sex. That's how I feel. And I'm not trying to hurt anybody by saying that. That's just how I feel. And I'm not trying to say being trans isn't valid by saying that either. I'm just saying that I don't feel like I am. I feel like I am transitioning. I don't attach to the word trans. And once my surgeries are done, I will be living out the rest of my life as just like a cis guy. But that's hard to say because of original birth certificate-ness. But in actuality, the male parts that are in me were in there when I was born, and the female parts will be completely removed. And the only things that will be left will be the male stuff. Now, that does not in any way, shape, or form mean that I would lie or would try to be like, oh yeah, I never had to go through any of this stuff or anything like that. I've made it very public. I've made it very open to people. I mean, it's accessible on, even besides on YouTube. You know, anyone can talk to me about it, and I'm not like hiding that or anything if someone asks me. But I don't want it to be the thing that I'm putting forward instantaneously about myself. I want to put forward myself. When I was talking to the doctor at my electrolysis appointment about, you know, just my medical history and stuff, and they were like, I can tell from the way that you talk that you're going to be the kind of patient that I really love. I can tell from your personality. And I liked that. I would like for people to meet me and just be like, your personality. That's the first thing I'm getting out of you is, here's your personality. I would like for that to just be the way it is. Like that, it'd be that simple. It'd be that, I don't need some special, you know, terms or definitions put on me to feel special. I actually would love to just be able to interact in a very, you know, natural and fluid way. And I would really, really like that. Like a lot. So anyway, that's how I'm feeling at the moment. That's how things are at the moment. And yeah, hopefully I will be starting electrolysis, and if I start electrolysis and I make a recording for like after my first appointment or whatever, I'll put it on here before the 18th of next month, obviously, but that's if I can get to it. Sometimes life is hectic. Anyway, I've been talking for quite a while, so I will go ahead and end this, but yeah. That's where I'm at with my transition.